Coming in July 2024, a new book by Jim Myers. Alone with Bigfoot, a collection of stories and reflections, 10 years in the making. Pre-orders will be available in June 2024. This book will feature IVT, Hangar One Publishing's exclusive immersive book technology, where you can see and hear the author's video and audio that he has captured during his many adventures. Please visit hangar1publishing.com for more info on all their amazing books.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your favorite podcast, the Sasquatch Outpost podcast, and we are episode 52 tonight. And we were having a little concern with YouTube before we started. If something happens and things go blank or whatever, just hang in there with us. We'll try and sort it out and get back on again, but hopefully it's not going to affect our show tonight. We'll see. We're not the only ones that have been having trouble with YouTube, so hopefully that's can be a temporary issue. The Untold Radio Network was booted from Facebook altogether because of somebody who reported us for really nothing, and so we're still trying to get back up and running on Facebook, and we are not yet. So it's going to be an interesting show tonight, and I've got your favorite guest, Jill Herrera, to come in for a little bit, and then after that, I'm gonna do something I've never done before in person or on podcasts, and that's following Dave Paletti's recommendation to talk some about my background and some things that I've never really talked about in a public forum before. So I want to talk about a couple of things. So you saw the ad in the intro for the book I'm writing, and I'm well into the book. So we're looking to July of this year to bring it out, and you'll be able to pre-order it in June, I believe, is what we're talking about with Hangar One Publishing. So you can look forward to that, and we'll keep you updated. And we've been announcing, Steph, let's throw up those two slides you created. We've been announcing the Rabbit Hole Adventures hikes, night hikes, horseback expeditions, and camping expeditions. And Jill, who's my guest tonight, works with me for the camping and horseback camping, and we're going to be doing all of those on her property this year. And the reason being, we didn't want to have to mess with the Forest Service again. And secondly, Jill has so much activity, and we're going to talk about some of that in a minute. She has so much activity on her property that Jill and I in talking decided, why don't we just bring people here? She's very rural to begin with. Why don't we just bring people here and see if we can't have more real encounters. So we're going to try it this summer. So this is a great summer if you're interested in doing any of these activities. This is a great summer to try because of what we're going to do differently, and that's going to be on Jill's private property. The night hikes are around Bailey or within 30 minutes of Bailey. The cave talks are my version of a TED Talk on the topic of Sasquatch and the research I'm doing. And so the first one's going to be the 16th of this month. We've only got 2 scheduled right now. So if you're interested, sign up, let us know, because we've set a minimum of 10 people to have signed up to do the cave talk. We had a few last year that we had 1 or 2 people. Not that those people aren't valuable, but it's a lot of work, and we figured that 10 should be a minimum. So hopefully we'll get at least 10 for the 16th. And then we've talked about this Estes Park Bigfoot Days. We'd love for you to come. We'd love for you to be with us. We're going to have our booth there, and I'm going to be doing a podcast from Estes Park because of Bigfoot Days, and I'll be interviewing one of the actors from Expedition Bigfoot on that particular podcast. So if you're there, you can be in the room. You can ask your questions live on camera, and it won't be a live broadcast, but everything that we do in that room will be live, and then we will air it 2 days later on the next Tuesday. I think that is, let me just double check. I think that's everything I had for tonight. So before I go into some of my background and everything, I wanted to briefly bring Jill Herrera. So let's bring Jill on. And Jill, hey Jill, good to see you. Oh,
can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. We're good.
Okay.
Jill, you need to know you are just about everyone's favorite guest, and so I get more comments about when are you gonna have Jill on again. I mean, I get those for other people, but consistently I get them for you. So I want you to know that.
Well, thank you guys. Good. Thanks everybody out there.
So there's you've had a lot of stuff going on recently. And
I have, yeah.
And I want to talk about some of it. No, I'm not going to talk about all of it. I want to save some of it for future podcasts so we can bring you in for, the first few minutes to talk about the latest thing. And you can bring up that slideshow, and I'm calling this the Jill Herrera Files. And high strangeness in Park County, Colorado with Jill Herrera. Because it truly is high strangeness. It's everything that everyone wonders about. Jill, you have just about everything happen on your property.
Yeah, more than I would. Well, it would be nice if I got some answers to some of this stuff, not just high strangeness, but I don't really want to talk to an alien or anything, so I guess I'm good.
And there's no experts to go to because I don't consider anyone an expert in the Bigfoot research world. So we're all just learning.
Yeah, when you're standing there looking at one, or when they're right out there, or they're making noises and yelling at you. I mean, it's like, answers, please.
Answers, please. So all we do know, when was the first incident you had? How many years ago was it?
Oh gosh, it was when we moved in here in February of 2012.
Okay.
And then you guys, I had no clue, none whatsoever. My world was black and white, and biology was just the animals we knew. And
yes.
So it took about probably about 2 years, and I got tired of my husband telling me it was an owl, and I started writing everything down because that's the only thing I was trained to log everything, So I started logging everything, and it was about 2 years after we moved here that I started.
Okay, so maybe 14 it got
Yeah.
really busy. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
It never stopped. It's just been
well,
crazy.
that's true. And
Crazy.
you've had everything from vocalizations, significant ones,
Yes.
eye glow, um,
Snowballs hitting me in the
snowballs
head.
hitting you in the head, you running out after them and getting knocked on your hiney.
Oh, yeah, that was
Um,
quite exciting. I flipped over backwards. It was like,
so
yeah, that was exciting.
yeah,
I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing that again.
no, no, one lesson learned for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is what we're going to just show briefly tonight is some eye glow that you guys have recorded recently, and Wayne asked if you're still logging the events.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I got to see a shadow person not too long ago. I put that down. That was exciting.
Nice.
I've never seen one ever. I mean, I didn't.
I'm not sure I want to, but
Well, you might when you're here.
so this is taken from your house camera, right?
Yeah, it's our security camera, or that you put up.
And you can't see anything, so you have to blow it up.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is the same picture but blown up, and the 4 arrows are pointing to 4 eyes.
Sets of eyes.
So John is asking, is this eye glow or eye shine?
It's eye glow because the eyes, and the reason I'm saying this is if it was shine, it would have been closer, I think, to the camera, because that camera doesn't reach so far out.
No.
And what you're looking at is actually at least, I would say 30, 40 yards back on the closest one, and maybe even farther than that. And the farthest one back there is actually over on my neighbor's property, is where I thought it was. And what's interesting, you see there's snow on the ground. We went out the next day looking for tracks, and there was no tracks anywhere.
No tracks.
No tracks.
And you looked the next day to see what could be on those trees to be reflecting like that.
Yes, I did.
And there was nothing.
No.
So you can see here there's nothing reflecting back in the follow-up picture. So
right, because I wanted to have a comparison so you guys could see that there's nothing out there. The next.
So go back one, Steph. Let's talk about that for a second. So here's okay. It's so funny to me. You got one going like this, looking sideways. The one in the middle, the one doing this is kind of white. The one in the middle is more red. Those eyes are red.
And I think they're farther back too. I think the closest one are the ones that are at an angle, like he's peeking around the tree. There's and you can't see the trees, but there's about 5 trees back behind those 2 that you can see.
And then the 2 farther back, if you could blow it up even more, when I did, there are definitely 2 more sets of eyes. Yeah. So, but they're just farther back.
Right.
So, what prompted you to grab that photo off of your video? Why did you even look to see?
So Ralph was I have so much stuff to do with the animals during the day that my day starts at like 5 in the morning. So I go to bed at like 8:30. I like to be asleep by 9 if I can. Ralph stays up and watches TV. He can't, if he goes to sleep that early, he'll be up at like 3 in the morning. So he was watching TV. And we had 2 horses in the corrals, and he heard the corral slam. Well, prior to this, about 4 days before this picture, we had 2 cats, 2 young mountain lions have been prowling our property. And David and I walked right underneath the one, and we didn't know he was up there until we went back about 30 minutes later, and he had jumped out of the tree and left us a beautiful set of prints. But we thought it was a cat. So I real fast got on my security cameras and started searching to see if I could find eye shine. And instead I saw the eye glow, which is not a cat. The cats are really cool. When you see their eyes, it's like, it's almost like looking into marble, because they have that clear lens on the outside. And when they shine at you, when they're up close,
theirs are only eye shine. They have to be reflected.
Yeah, you have to have a flashlight or something on them.
But you told me, and the reason I know these in this picture are not cats, one, they're too high, but 2, your horses were not concerned at all. They were not acting strange.
Well, they're used to the Bigfoot, so
They're used to the Bigfoot, but they're not used to.
no.
They wouldn't
If
be
it
used
was
to
a
four
cat, they
mountain
would've
lions.
yeah,
So
if it was a cat out there, they would have been going crazy.
yeah, and
So
they weren't.
no,
So
thankfully.
go on down, and you can tell us about these next couple.
Okay.
So
Oh,
this is two different ones showing the same
right. It's
eye
eyeshine.
glow.
And David was trying. My son was. He's it really high tech stuff, and I don't do any of that. I mean, I most of the time, as you know, Jim, I don't have my phone with me most of the time to even take a picture. But
No, you don't.
he was
This is
trying.
true.
He was trying out a green filter. It was supposed to be like night vision or something that you can get. It's a app that you can get on your phone. He's got an iPhone. I have a Samsung, and so he got some kind of a weird um, uh, program on his phone that was supposed to let you see like daylight. And
Okay.
so the first shot was he stepped out on. Both of my kids smoke, unfortunately. I wish they didn't, but they do. But he was out on his patio smoking, and he saw the eyes. So he tried to see if he could see a body to go with it, and that's what he got. And then the next one, the one to the right. Oh, well, the one to the
The one on
right
the right there. Yeah.
is you can see the tree is different. It's moved. It's so it just shows that it was there, and then it blurred and it moved. Usually they'll close their when they turn their head, you can't see the eye glow
Right.
until they
Right.
turn and look back at you. So it was on the move, and he got another shot of it. So
And it's strange because that one on the left looks like it's in front of the trees. I don't know how this happens.
you know what?
I can't explain it.
I know. I can't explain when you're hearing them. You can almost hear them breathe on you, and you can't see them.
And you can't see anything.
You can't see them. It's like
Yeah.
I don't know if they're ventriloquists and they can throw their voice really like far.
Well, they'd have to throw their eyes too. I don't think
I
they
don't
do
know.
that. So
I don't-
okay. And then let's move to the next one. So this one
John-
was this one lightened artificially?
Yes, John.
Okay.
So the again, my cameras, you can only do 3 things with those cameras that I have up there. It has contrast, brightness, and there's another one that makes it clear or fuzzy when
Okay.
you push that one. Well, John was looking at this. He saw this light over there, and he was like, "What is that?" And so he took the brightness is just gray, so it'll bring it brings the gray tones or something out. I think it was contrast that he did on this. And so it was really dark, and then he did that because of the snow. If the snow
Yeah.
wasn't there, it would just all be black. But anyway, and this light was out there, which he thinks is eye shine, but I don't know, guys. I don't, because it moved through the forest, and he actually
So-
saw it the whole time it was moving through the trees. And I'm like, unless they were looking right at you and walking sideways, I don't know.
The next one I think shows that motion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the camera is staying in one place,
Correct.
and this thing,
It
whatever
can't-
it is moving.
And when you rotate the cameras, they don't rotate very fast. So if there's something moving fast, you'll get a blur like that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, no answers.
No answers. But
And they
So
do.
let's see.
Their eyes do come in that color. We see that a lot. The gold color or orange or whatever, and we see the white a lot. I have the big one is the red one.
yeah.
And then last year we got one that had green eyes or blue eyes. It's hard to tell at a distance. It didn't come in very close.
Yeah.
But it was very, very tall because the eyes, or it was small and it climbed trees. I don't know.
Could be.
So,
It could be.
It was high up.
Somebody asked about orbs. We're going to do that next time. Yes. I
Yes.
believe you have seen some orbs, right?
I have orbs a lot here.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. Come out and come camping with us. You never know what you're going to see at this place.
No.
Never. It's
And
a surprise.
It's
There's-
about 2 hours from Bailey to get to this property. So please get online, check out the Rabbit Hole Adventures, and sign up for one of the trips that Jill and I are going to be doing
Right.
this summer.
Because I don't know if I'm going to open it up next year. I know I'm open to it this year, and
Right.
we'll see how it goes, because I really want you guys. I want you to have the experiences I have. I wish I
Yeah.
could guarantee it, but it's
No.
like, but I'll tell you, they're so active out here, and I'm outside a lot. I'm probably outside at least 3 to 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
you
at
are.
night, sometimes I check the horses, so I'm out again. So in the summertime, I love to go out at night. So with
Well,
somebody else, usually,
yeah.
not by myself.
Well, we'll be doing a lot of that this summer. So,
Yeah.
so Jill, thank you for coming in and showing us your high strangeness of late. And there's a lot more that we're going to look at with Jill sometime in the next few weeks. So
We have so many pictures that
yeah,
Jim couldn't possibly show them to you all in one setting. So, but I sure hope you come out and join us. We'd love to have you.
great.
So,
Well, thank you, Jill. We'll look forward to the next time.
all right. Bye, everybody.
So always something new with Jill, always something going on that you can't understand. So contrary to popular belief, I have not been a Sasquatch researcher for my whole life, nor have I owned the Sasquatch Outpost. I think many people in Bailey assume I've been doing this forever. No, I have not. And when Dave Pilates was on, he made a comment. He's, thanks, Michael. I appreciate that. I really think you should do a podcast just about your background because people won't believe the things you've done. So I didn't have a guest planned. I knew I was going to bring Jill in for a bit, but I didn't have another guest. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this open podcast to talk a little bit about my background. Now, honestly, I don't talk about myself very much. You can ask my staff and my family. And a lot of the things I'm going to talk about tonight, I never talk about. In fact, I don't think I've ever talked about them with anyone. So this is going to be an interesting experiment, and I may never talk about these things again. So that's just me. I'm not, a lot of people have a lot to say about themselves, which is fine. That's just not the way I am. So tonight is your opportunity. So if you're tuned in tonight, then here we go. Buckle up. That's all I can say. So I tell people, when I tell them anything about my life, I say I've lived at least 3 lives already, completely different lives, doing completely different things for many years each time. I'm over 60, even though I know I don't look it. I know I look 40s, 30s. But anyway, I know I don't. So I know you're all laughing at me right now. But I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Born in Tulsa, 1962. Lived in Oklahoma about 5 years. My folks were from Oklahoma. My grandparents were from Oklahoma or Arkansas, one of the two. And in about 67, we moved to Southern California for a few years. And then in 1974, we made a huge change as a family. Before that, one thing happened that had a great influence on what I'm doing right now, and that is 1972, the film The Legend of Boggy Creek came out in the cinemas, and my younger brother and I went to see it. I was 8. Let's see, 72. I was 10. My younger brother was 8. It was scary. I remember being scared by that film, but it got me thinking. Now, in that movie, they never used the term Bigfoot or Sasquatch that I remember. They just called it the Boggy Creek Monster. And it's a story of a true story of a true place called Fouke, Arkansas, that would have this Sasquatch come through periodically. And most of the actors in this film were people who had the experiences themselves. So they're not professional actors. They are the people who lived all these things. And the Sasquatch would come through people's property, kill their hogs, kill their dogs, never harmed any people that I remember hearing. Scared a lot of people. But I remember thinking after that, I wonder if there's things like that in the woods. Could it be that there's a Boggy Creek monster? And then later on, I realized that it was a Sasquatch they were talking about in that film, even if they didn't call it that. So that had a huge influence on me they had me thinking for many years about that. Okay. So 1974, we moved to Kenya. My parents were missionaries. From the time I was 11 until I graduated from high school, I grew up in Kenya. And part of growing up in those days in Africa was particularly for missionaries. There was an international school in Nairobi where we lived. Nairobi, interestingly, was the same altitude as Denver. It's a mile high. And the kids who came from a diplomatic background or USAID or other organizations, many of them would go to a school in Nairobi that was built for Americans. But, being missionaries, of course, there had to be a missionary school because they had to teach what they wanted the kids to learn, and that wasn't going to happen at an international school for diplomat kids. So I attended Rift Valley Academy. Now, you can start that slideshow. So from the time I was from 9th through 12th grade, before that I was at a school in Nairobi with my folks being there, but there was no high school for missionary kids in Nairobi. So Nairobi is very high. So the school was built on the edge of the Great Rift Valley. This was literally the view we had every day looking out from our school. And that's looking across the Great Rift Valley. That crater in the middle is Mount Longonot. It's a dormant volcano. It's not even extinct. And way past that, the gray hills you see beyond that are the other side of the Great Rift Valley. And so, it's a dormant volcano. So it still has steam vents. There's still activity going on in it. So the Rift Valley at that place is about 40 miles wide, maybe a bit more, but and it is dropping every year a little by little. But anyway, when I was in high school, now this was an awesome place to go to school. And looking back on it, now if I were there, I probably wouldn't send my kids to boarding school. But back then there were no other options really. And honestly, I loved it. And it had a huge influence on me for the rest of my life. And my 6 best friends and I still get together from that high school, still get together every year. And we're going to be getting together in September, renting a houseboat together. So we built friendships that have lasted our whole lifetime at that school. And so I remember some of the crazy things we did. In my sophomore year, several of us hiked from our high school all the way down to that volcano, up to that very peak on the volcano that you can see, and back in a day. And you can go to the next slide. So there was a trail that went right around the edge of that volcano. And there were other times that we would climb. Now this is, this can only happen in those days in Africa with, what we would do as kids. I'm sure they would never let them do today, but we would go down there and go camping, and we would climb down in this crater, and it was thick jungle. And there were monkeys, there were leopards, there was everything you can imagine down in there. And we would camp. It's just amazing. None of us were ever killed by something, but snakes or anything else. But anyway, it was an awesome place. And that volcano, a lot of us would go down to the volcano for different things when we were going to school there. So when I was in school, we played rugby and soccer. For those who understand those two sports, I played flanker in rugby, and I played fullback in soccer. We never played American football because nobody else played American football. So who are you going to play against? We did play basketball, but I've never been a basketball player. And a couple interesting things about the school. If you go to the next slide. So this school, this is the way it looked when I was in school. This school was established in 1906. And the cornerstone was actually laid by President Teddy Roosevelt when he was visiting Kenya in 06. And so the cornerstone is still there. You can still see the writing about when he did that. And so that was a really cool thing. But all the buildings were built out of cinder block. Everything was built out of cinder block, still is. And we had to wear uniforms. I remember that. I don't think they do anymore, but we had to wear uniforms. All the guys had to wear khaki, and the girls had to wear like gray skirts and white blouses. And I don't even remember. But keep going. I can't remember what else I put in here. This is what one of our dorm rooms looked like. Yes, I know it looks like prison, but it was not prison. But I mean, we would bring things in and tape them on pictures and stuff, tape them on our walls. But at the end of every quarter, we had 3 quarters a year that we were there, and then we would have a whole quarter pretty much off because we had kids that came to that school from 2,000 miles away because it was the only American missionary school that they could go to for high school anyway. Now, this funny story. So this is what we call Jubilee Hall. And because it was a missionary school, of course, we had to go to chapel every day, 5 days a week, and then church on Sunday. So I remember one time when we were seniors, and we had been messing around with one of the teachers, and we decided we would play a prank the next day for chapel service. And the whole school, well, at least the whole high school, would go to chapel. Now, this is a school of 450 kids total from K through 12. So the high school is about 250 maybe. But we all had to be there. They would check your seats to make sure you were there. If you were out, you got detention. So what we did, this teacher was really a cool dude. So he gave us the keys, told us never to tell anybody, gave us the keys. And our theme song for our high school graduating class was Kool and the Gang, Celebrate. And so still love that song to this day because it brings back so many great memories. So we recorded on a cassette tape. That's all we had, cassette tapes. We recorded about 10 minutes of silence and then that song at full volume. And when we came in for chapel, one of us walked in and we taped it up under the night before we had taped it up under the sound system and put a microphone right against the speaker of the tape recorder. So when we came in for chapel, one of us just hit play and we went and sat down. And then we all wished we hadn't done it, but there was nothing we could do because everything was in the works. And so one of the kids who worked, who was a techno geek, he could hear it, and he could hear something faintly going, shh, but he couldn't find it. And it just happened that day, this was the 75th anniversary of the founding of the school. And one of the biggest, not the founder, because it had been too long, but one of the biggest names in the school's history was there speaking of that chapel. And we talked about that the night before, and we decided we're just going to do it anyway. What the heck? So, but when you're sitting there and he gets up to speak, then you're thinking, God, we should not have done this. We should not have done this. And so all of a sudden, this music starts blaring. Everyone's looking at each other like, and he was really cool. He's like, well, it looks like the seniors are doing their end of year pranks, but nobody knew where this tape recorder was. And so the principal gets up and he says, okay, whoever's behind this prank, can you please turn it off? We're all like, I don't know who did that. Some idiot did that. Who did that? And we never let on. So they found it. They eventually found it. And then he went on with his speech. And but we love doing stuff like that. So just a story, but the school is built on a mountain surrounded by forest. We could hear colobus monkeys day and night screaming in the trees, and it was just a fantastic place to go to school. So finished high school in 81, had a graduating class of 65, all of 65, and left and came back to the States to attend Auburn. I think that's the next slide. Yes, I bleed orange and blue, and seriously bleed orange and blue. And I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, which is why I went to Auburn. And I found out from chemistry that I did not want to be a veterinarian because I could not do it. I could not handle the technical and the scientific, even though I love science, but organic chemistry weeded me straight out. And so because I've always been an artist all the years I was growing up, I switched majors to graphic design, graduated with a degree in graphic design. My claim to fame is that I attended college with Bo Jackson and Charles Barkley. So two of the greatest names in Auburn sports. I was at school with them. So everybody, all the students went to every football game, and we all went to every basketball game. It was a phenomenal time to be in college, and that was great fun. So after I graduated, I worked for a few years in Atlanta, and then I decided that I wanted to go back overseas, and I ended up going back into the faith-based nonprofit world. All right. So the first place I went as a single guy in 1989 was Senegal. It's the westernmost country of Africa. And funny thing about Senegal is, Michael, yeah, I can believe that. They have to put a lot of pets down, that's for sure. This in the picture on the right, that little green smile, if you look at Senegal like a face, is another country, and that's called the Gambia. Senegal is French speaking, so we had to learn French. And the Gambia is English speaking. The British settled the Gambia as far as they could fire a cannon either side of the river. And so that's why it's just funny, long country. But to get to the southern part of Senegal, you either had to drive taxis and go through the Gambia. So you're going through another country, even though it's inside that country. So you had to stop at border control, or you could take a boat around, an overnight boat around on the ocean to the southern part. And but it's funny because it's typical of colonialism, right? They just divided people groups arbitrarily. So the people in the Gambia were the same tribes as the people in the Senegal, spoke the same tribal tongues, but otherwise, the ones in Gambia spoke English, Senegal, they spoke French, and they hated each other. And it was just such a weird thing to go through the Gambia, and particularly if I had Senegalese friends with me, and to see the abuse they got from the Gambians. And I'm sure it was the same when Gambians came into Senegal. Anyway, enough for your colonial lesson here, but it was, we had to learn French. That was the main trade language of Senegal, but there were, within Senegal, I think we had something like, I don't remember, 50, 60 tribal languages, something like that. And people have often asked me, so how many languages do you speak? Well, 2 fluently, or maybe not 1 fluently. Some people doubt whether I speak English very well, but French and English, and I speak some Swahili, some Wolof, which was the major trade language in Senegal, and some Arabic. And this last week, I was with my daughter. We were at Southwest Plaza here in Denver, and they have a bunch of escape rooms in the mall, and the I took my daughter because we're planning to build an escape room on the second story of our store, Bigfoot themed escape room. So we went to go do an escape room, and then I talked to the guys who run it. And so just happens that in that mall, there's an African store, and it just happens that the woman who runs that is Senegalese. So we walk in there, and I went up to the counter. She was by herself. There was no one else in the store. And I said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Senegal." And then I greeted her in Wolof. She just started giggling and holding her mouth. She thought that was the funniest thing. This white guy was speaking Wolof. And we kept talking Wolof for a few minutes. And then I switched to French because my Wolof is kind of rusty now. But great conversation. And then just happens that one of the restaurants in that mall is a Middle Eastern restaurant. So I go in and I asked the guys, "Where are you from?" And they said, "Jordan." So I start talking to them in Arabic, and they start laughing. They think that's the funniest thing. And it's not like I speak every language. It just happened that in that mall, there were two places that they speak two languages that I speak some of. And so that was a lot of fun. What local African delicacy do I miss? Okay. Quick side story here. So in Senegal, and thanks for the question. In Senegal, when we go out to the village, so let me show a couple pictures here. So this is downtown Dakar. We lived in Dakar, the capital city. Bustling, busy, smelly, you name it. It's a busy African city, and keep going. I'm going to answer that question in a second. This is the capital city of Dakar. It's built on a peninsula. And so because we were surrounded by ocean, one of my only real hobby when we lived there was spearfishing. So one of my best friends, another guy doing kind of the same work that I was doing, American guy, we would go spearfishing, and and it was great fun. I mean, we messed ourselves up multiple times on sharp coral and getting poked by sea urchins and stuff. But really, it was great fun, and we would almost always bring something home to cook. But so Dakar is built on this peninsula, and then go on one more, I think. They're well known for fishing. They would use these really colorful fishing boats when they would go out fishing. And when you go inland, Senegal is a very hot, very dry country, but it's one of the countries where you can find these trees. Anyone know what kind of tree this is? Anyone in the chat? I'm curious to see. Very famous kind of African tree. Anybody? I'll give a prize if one person knows what kind of tree this is. And no cheating, no Googling. Not seeing a big tree. Thanks, Wayne. No, that doesn't count. Banyan, nope. Baobab. Jeff, awesome, dude. Baobab trees. And the local legends are that God turned those trees upside down and planted them top down, and it's the roots, and it kind of looks like that, the roots in the air. The baobab trees grow the fruit from which we get tartar. We called it monkey bread because it's a big long fruit, about like this, and it's brown, and it looks like when you cut into it, it looks kind of like bread. But they only grow in dry climates. Oui, Ginger. Il faut qu'on parle en français. So there's one more picture, I think. I spent a lot of time in villages like this. Like in most countries, the biggest problem the people faced was, besides poverty, was malaria. So everybody had malaria, and I had it multiple times growing up in Kenya and in Senegal. Hasn't come back in many years now, thankfully. But Cream of tartar. Yes, that's right, Daphne. This was our house in Dakar for about 8 years. So I went as a single guy. It's a long story, but met my wife, Daphne. She wasn't there. She was working in South Africa, but I met her in South Africa. And I remember the night I met her at my sister and brother-in-law's house. They were also working in South Africa at that time. And the night before I flew back to Senegal, I got to keep an eye on time here. The night before I flew back to Senegal, I'd been in South Africa 3 weeks. I met Daphne because she and her roommate came over to babysit my sister's kids while we went out to a movie. And we got back from the movie and met Daphne and her roommate. And Daphne and I went in the kitchen to make coffee or tea for everyone, whatever they wanted. And we ended up staying in there talking for like an hour. And I'm sure everyone else was wondering, where's our coffee and tea? But we talked for an hour, and I remember thinking to myself that night, and Daphne, and I found out later, was thinking the same thing. I remember thinking, wow, what a nice gal. Too bad she lives in South Africa. And the reason I thought that was at that time, apartheid was going strong in South Africa. And no country in Africa would allow South Africans into their country. And in fact, South African Airways couldn't overfly any country in Africa. So to get to Europe above Africa, they had to fly all around the coast of Africa. And they had to South African Airways had to buy an island in the Indian Ocean that they used only for refueling. It was only big enough to land a jumbo jet on, refuel, take off. There was nothing else on the island. But they had to do that because it was too far to fly around Africa. They would have run out of fuel. So they had to have a place to refuel. It was crazy. So I remember saying, what a great woman, but too bad she lives in South Africa because we could never get together. And she thought, yeah, too bad he's American, and too bad he's working not too bad he's American. Sorry. Too bad he's working in Senegal because Senegal would never let me in. So long story, we started corresponding, and back in those days, there was no internet. So if there's any kids listening, you actually had to write a letter. I know that's unheard of. And you had to put a stamp on it and mail it. And my letters to her would take about 3 weeks to get to her, and hers would take about 3 weeks. And we were writing every day, but we never knew which letter each one of us was responding to because it took so long for the letters to get back and forth. So we got engaged, and I wanted her to come to Senegal to visit before she moved there to be with me. And so to get her into Senegal, I had to get special permission from the Minister of the Interior of the country to let my girlfriend in. And yes, this was all during apartheid. So they let her in. And after that, when we eventually got married, we managed to get Daphne American citizenship so that she could come back and live with me in Senegal permanently. Okay, I think, is that all? Oh, this is Daphne and our eldest, Corrine, and our middle daughter, Nicole, wearing their gorgeous little African dresses. It was, this is kind of the fabric that they use. So back up just a second. So, no, back up to the Senegal one. Sorry. So these two daughters were born in Senegal, in the capital city of Dakar. And our third, Jacqueline, was born in Johannesburg, South Africa. And our eldest on the left there is pregnant with our first grandchild. Yay! I'm so excited. And so many, many years back, this is Corrine, but so it wasn't long after this picture was taken that we ended up leaving Senegal and we moved to France. We moved to France in 1999. So got to Senegal in 89, moved to France in 99. And we went to live in this little village called Saint-Sauveur-sur-École. And that was just had 1,000 people back then, still only has 1,000 people. I just checked today. And beautiful little village, French village, surrounded by farmland. Thanks for the congrats, Jeff. And I've been a dog granddad for a while now. I'm looking forward to being a human granddad. And if you go to the next slide, I think this is our the house. Now, this is the house we owned for 10 years. It didn't look like that back then because we had a big hedge in front. We had a big tree in the backyard that our daughter, I built a tree house in for our daughters. And so they cut all that down, and we planted a cherry tree that was just starting to bear fruit before we left, and it's gone now. So whatever. I don't know why they cut all that down, but so we were in France for 10 years. There's a few more pictures of the village. That's the school. So our daughters were educated most of their early years in French in the local French school in our village. So this was just down the hill from our house, and werewolf country. And next slide is what we call the lavoir. This is where women used to go and wash their clothes in the village 100 years ago. And yeah, John, I would not be able to drive my truck, my power wagon, on just about any of the roads in France, in the villages anyway. And I think there's one more. This is another town, another road in our village. That was a beautiful, beautiful little village. The church in our village was 900 years old. 900 years old. So 3 times as old as the United States, almost. And so huge history. But oh, I appreciate that. Thanks. The France was really just a bedroom community for me. And my wife and kids were there. There I am in all my Frenchness with my French hat on. We had our youngest at that point, Jacqueline. So, but I lived in France for those next 10 years, but I worked for the same nonprofit organization, but the France was the headquarters for this organization for 30 countries in North Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia. So I was the director of operations. I managed a multi-million-dollar budget, and I oversaw everything related to finance, IT, office management in all those 30 countries. And in my spare time, I was the crisis manager for all those 30 countries. So I was the first point of call for any crisis. Now, you can imagine in all over North Africa, Middle East, and Central Asia, largely Muslim countries, and this was a Christian nonprofit. This was not the most popular organization in that region. And so we had crises. And when I took over as crisis manager, I had no training. And go on to the next slide. I want to talk about that before I go into these stories. I would visit these countries regularly: Afghanistan, Egypt, Mauritania, Morocco, Sudan, Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Tunisia, Algeria, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and the Gaza Strip. I only went to Gaza once, and probably shouldn't have gone even that time. I went with a friend of mine. We were in Israel for some other things. We decided to go. We had some friends, Palestinian friends who lived in the Gaza Strip, so we decided to go see them. And the reason it was a stupid thing to do is not everyone in the Gaza Strip loved Americans then or now. And so it was reasonably possible that any taxi driver we would hire would have some kind of an agreement with Hamas or one of the other groups to take any Americans that were stupid enough to get in his taxi and take them to be taken captive. Thankful that didn't happen. There were curtains in the taxi, which we made sure we closed. And we got in, got to see our friends, got back out. But yeah, I'm telling you, and I haven't even gotten to the third life yet. So, I was the first point of call for any crisis. And I remember when I took over as a crisis manager, the first call I got, now everyone's looking at me. All these 1,200 staff are looking at me like I'm the expert, and I had no training. So everything I learned virtually was on the job training. And so I did subsequently get some training, and I got about 50 hours of training as a hostage negotiator. So I'm a certified hostage negotiator. And no, I don't want to negotiate for anybody anymore. Thank you very much. But the first call I got was from our director in Iraq, and you can take the slideshow down for now. Our director in Iraq and an Iraqi and Christian Iraqi. And he told me that one of his employees had been kidnapped and was being taken by the kidnappers in a car, in the back of the car, in the trunk. And at a light, he realized the traffic was slowing down, and he managed to pop the trunk and jump out and start to run away. And as he ran away, they shot him, but he got away. So my first crisis to deal with, here I am. He says, please help me, help us. And I'm like, all right, here we go. And I would always grab a bunch of people and create a crisis team, but none of us knew anything in the early days. We had to figure it all out. So yeah, out of the frying pan into the fire. So because he was shot, he had injuries that needed to be dealt with, and it was more than civilians could handle. We needed to go to the hospital, but we knew that the guys that kidnapped him knew which neighborhood he lived in, and so they would be waiting for him to go to the hospital. So every time he had to go to the hospital, they would get 2 cars full of heavily armed guys to transport him to the hospital, get his treatments, and transport him back to his house. This was every day or every other day. And we knew they were looking for him because of things that were going on, that their houses were being surveilled, and the director's house was being surveilled. And so it was time to get this guy. There was no way he was going to be able to continue living there. As a Christian Iraqi, his life was always going to be in danger. So we made a plan to get him out of Baghdad. And these are still during the days of Saddam. And so there was a company there like Blackwater. It was a pseudo military company organization, and they had armored vehicles. So we had to hire one of these groups with armored vehicles, come pick him up and get him like 2 a.m. and take him to the north of the country initially, where there was less of a threat against his life. And then from there, we had to get him evacuated to Europe, and it was a huge deal. And I remember thinking, man, what a lot of work that was. That was one of many of those kind of situations we had to deal with. So, and in fact, the director for that country, after this guy was gone, they were still looking for him. And so he noticed somebody was watching his house. And then one morning he wakes up, and it wasn't Blackwater. It was like Blackwater, but somebody knocked on his door. So he goes, opens the door, which was stupid to begin with, and there's a bag hanging on the doorknob. And so he grabs the bag and brings it in, and inside was a pipe bomb that somehow did not detonate. It would have killed the whole family. And so then we had to get him out because he couldn't stay anymore because his life was in danger. So it was a horrible time for many people. May not be much better now. I'm not sure, but that was my initiation into crisis management. There's only a couple of stories I'm going to tell you because I don't want to take 3 hours to do this tonight. But and again, I've never told these stories before. The second major event that happened was, and this is sometime later, and I had more training by then, and I had some people I could call on here in the States who were experts in risk assessment and had a lot of experience in crisis management. And I would call them, it'd be 2 a.m. here in the States. And I mean, they expected it. That was their job. And so they were consultants. So anyway, I get a call from one of our personnel in Egypt. And they said that one of the employees was missing. And so I said, well, how long has he been missing? And they said 24 hours. I said 24 hours. And they had received a hostage demands for this guy. Your middle name Danger. It's funny you mentioned that, Patricia, because all those years that we were in France and I was doing all of these things, Daphne called me her Jack Bauer. And so she said, Jim's my missionary Jack Bauer. And so, of course, I didn't want to deny that because every guy wants to be Jack Bauer, right? So, but anyway, I said 24 hours. And so they had received a demand for this guy. And so they knew he was taken hostage. And when I found out about this, they could tell from the code on the phone that had called them, the number that had called them, that it was coming from a small town outside of Cairo. All right. So they knew where this guy was likely being held. So I find out that the 4 top leaders of this organization in Egypt had gotten in a car and were going commando, and they were going to go rescue this guy in this town. And so I knew what was going to happen. If they got to that town, I was going to have 5 hostages, not 1. And so I had to call these guys, tell them, stop wherever you are, pull off the side of the road and stop, please. This is not going to help anything. You guys are not commandos. The guys that are holding your friend are thugs. They're just waiting for you to do something like stupid like this. So, they stopped, they turned around, got them turned around, which was not an easy task because they weren't too sure about my expertise yet. And they were probably right, but we managed to get in touch. And this is where the hostage negotiations started coming in. We had to start negotiating with the hostage takers, and we weren't sure who they were, and we weren't sure what they were after, and we weren't sure they were after money for sure. So this guy, this event escalated so fast. From the time I got the phone call, it escalated from 0 to 150 miles an hour. And for 3 days, we didn't sleep. The crisis team and I, we didn't sleep. We hardly ate. And when you're in the middle of something like that, I had to assign people, tell us when it's mealtime, because we would forget everything. And we were just focused on resolving that crisis and getting that guy back. And we were in Paris, and we set up a crisis team in Egypt. And this thing just kept ramping up, and we kept getting threats against the other staff and had to keep moving people. So anyway, it came to a head at the end of the 3rd day, and they wanted us to make a drop. So they wanted us to drop off some money and some cell phones. And I could tell by some of the things they wanted that these weren't professional guys. These were thugs. But they were saying if we didn't do that, they were going to kill him. And this guy had a wife and 2 small children, all right? So this was the horrible things that a crisis manager has to do, we had to decide who was going to make the drop. And so we're talking together, and I'm talking with these guys who I know and loved dearly in Egypt, still do. And we're having to figure out which one of them was going to go make this drop. And there was every possibility that when they made the drop, they would be taken as well. And so we picked one of the guys, and my team, we were making plans to fly to Egypt to be closer, because that's one of the principles of crisis management, to be as close as you could be safely to the crisis itself without becoming a crisis on your own. But so we were going to try and fly into Egypt. But anyway, we made this decision. We hang up the phone. I just burst into tears, and I thought, I'm sending a dear friend of mine to his death right now. And we sat there and waited. We were all just kind of quiet. Everybody's kind of lost in their thoughts, wondering what's going to happen. And then the phone rings, and on the other end, I hear these guys screaming. And I thought, oh no, just what we feared has happened. And they weren't screaming. They were screaming and laughing and crying. And as soon as we got off the phone with them, they had gotten a call, come pick up Ibrahim. And they told him to come to the train station. We hadn't even made a drop yet. So they went. Ibrahim was there, bad shape. He had been beaten severely, but he was alive. But they had him. And so we found out later that for 3 days, these guys were just thugs. For 3 days, they've been talking to each other about how they were going to kill him, all the different ways they were going to kill him. And they finally told them they were just going to throw him in a vat of boiling oil. And so they said, come on. And they took him, and they were marching him down these back alleyways in Cairo, or not in Cairo, in another town. And I remember, what was it, Alexandria? I can't remember now. It's been a long time. And all of a sudden, one of the guys splits off, and the other guys keep going. There were 3 guys. The guy that split off took him to the train station, sat him down, and said, wait here. And then they went and called the other guys to come pick him up. We found out sometime later the whole thing was set up by the secret police, because they were trying to intimidate the local Egyptians to stop what the work they were doing there. And so that was another guy we had to find asylum for in another country. Last story on this crisis management, and then I'm going to tell you how we got into what we're doing now. And obviously it's going to relate directly to what I'm doing now. So this is why I have 3 lives. So when we lived in France, we lived very close to Paris, about 25 miles south of Paris. And we would go into Paris, and Daphne would always make me drive, because she said driving to Paris was too scary. And it wasn't uncommon. We'd be driving to Paris, and we'd be like one of these huge roundabouts, and you'd have 2 cars stop in the middle of the roundabout, in the middle of rush hour, and guys get out and start punching it out, duking it out right there in the middle of Paris, just because they get mad at each other. I'm like, can't you guys go over on the side of the road somewhere and do this? That happened one time. I was on a flight. I was going through Charles de Gaulle. I was on my way out. We had to catch buses often to take us different sections because the airport was so big. And the driver of our bus was North African. And we stopped at a stop sign between terminals, and he looks over to his left, and there's a French guy there who must have insulted him verbally or non-verbally. And the bus driver jumps out of the bus, and they run over there to start fighting. And I'm like, seriously? We've got planes to catch. And eventually, and everybody on the bus was like, oh, come on, as the French love to do. Oh, and so he gets back in the bus, and we think, okay, let's go. And then he jumps back out of the bus again and runs back over. And I'm like, I was about to go jump out of the bus and say, okay, we got an issue now because I'm going to miss my flight. He finally got back in, and we left. But that was that kind of animosity was going on a lot, unfortunately. But between North Africans and French, and so many French were born in North Africa, and so many North Africans were born in France, and a lot of it just didn't make any sense. But no, Jeff, I never did get to fly the Concorde, but on my recent trip to England, I got to do a VIP tour of one of the Concordes, which was fantastic. It was one of the best days I remember for a long time. So, anyway, back to the story. So there were some wonderful hotels in France that we never stayed in because we were poor missionaries, and we had very wealthy friends who would come regularly to our office, Americans. And one of these times they called us up and said, "Hey, we'd like you to come spend the night with us at the Four Seasons George V hotel." We're like, "What?" And so yeah, they said, "Come on down." So we got a room booked for you guys. This is like one of the nicest hotels in the entire world. And so we drive down there in our little Renault Clio car, and we pull up, and, I start to get out and unload our suitcases. And of course you don't do that. They have valets to do all that. And so I'm feeling like a country bumpkin, and they take our bags, and they take the car, and they say, "Just go inside. So we go in the hotel, get checked into our room. We get our suitcase in there and everything, and then we're going to go out with our friends. To a bistro around the corner. And we have been so looking forward to this. I mean, they were very good friends. We thought, man, this is going to be so much fun to go to this really nice hotel. We had never done this the entire time we lived in France. All right. And we've been there years by that point. So get checked in, go to the bistro, and then my phone rings. Now, you got to remember, I'm first point of call for any crisis. So the guy on the other end is screaming and crying so hard I can't understand him. So I have to go outside, and it's one of actually a South African guy that worked with me in France, and he's crying and he's crying and he's saying they've killed them. And I'm like, "Who are you talking about?" And it took a while for him to compose himself. And it turned out that 2 of our personnel in Turkey had been murdered by young religious zealots. And so I got off the phone with him, walked back into the bistro, looked at our friends and said, "I'm sorry, our weekend's over. And I have to go deal with this." So we went, got our luggage, went back. That crisis lasted weeks, and it was 2 of our folks and a person from another organization that were all together. They had a Christian bookstore there. These young guys had been posing as interested in Christianity so that they could get in on the day they had planned, and they came in. I won't tell you all the things that happened in that room after they locked the doors, but the police found out somehow. And just before the police burst in, they murdered them. And then these guys tried to escape, and they caught all of them. So we had a team of about 100 people in Turkey at that point. And though everyone on the team knew these guys, they were all very close. And so we had other threats coming against the organization, and people making threats verbally and written. And so it was a huge ordeal to make sure everybody was safe. But even once we figured that the immediate crisis was over, then we had to go in and do critical incident debriefing for everyone on the team in small groups. And if you guys have ever been in law enforcement or critical incident debriefing, is really critical to not getting PTSD later in life because of those incidents. So that took weeks and weeks to work out. So I'm dealing with all these crises. I'm also leading this team of, probably 50 people more, doing all the finance and everything. And people used to ask me, "Boy, isn't it stressful doing crisis management?" I didn't tell them this, but I thought, no, the stress is dealing with the finances and IT and personnel And I used to think every time a crisis would come, I think, whew, finally something I know how to do. And I could forget all the rest of that for a day or 3 or 6 or whatever. And it was the operation stuff that ate my lunch in the end. And so after 10 years, I hit a place of where I was so stressed out, and I wasn't because of the crisis management stuff. It was team conflicts within this team. And I hit burnout in a spectacular way. And so the organization, for all I may have against the organization, I will always be grateful for this, that they took this seriously, sent Daphne and I back to the States, to Colorado, to get some counseling. It was a lifesaver for us. And we ended up spending 2 months in counseling here. And as a result of that, decided to resign from that job, even though I love France. We loved France. That was never the issue. It was the job I was doing from France. And I burned out. I desperately needed the break. I was in a hit an emotional wall like I've never hit before or since. And so we came back for counseling. And while we were here, of course, we're in Colorado. So on the days we weren't in counseling sessions, we were driving up to Conifer, Colorado, to Bailey, Colorado, driving, looking at the beautiful mountains, fishing. And once we decided we were going to resign from that job, we had to decide what we're going to do now. And we thought, well, why don't we move to Colorado? And I had such a weird view of God that I expected God to beat me on the head. And I would say to Daphne, why don't we move to Colorado? And then I would go like this, waiting to get hit with a big stick, you know? And of course, it never happened. So we made a decision to move, and we ended up moving in 2009 to Colorado. And we lived in Conifer for a few years, and I started a crisis management training and consulting company for a few years, and I did that, and that was fine. That was a good transition. And then we decided to reopen a grocery store in Bailey that had been shut up for many years, the Bailey Country Store. It was kind of the anchor of Bailey for most of its lifetime. Now, this building that this grocery store was in was built in 1878. So it's the oldest standing business in Bailey. Barely standing sometimes, I think. So this is what the store looked like. This is after getting an initial paint job. And so it was a Bailey Country Store. It's what it had been called. It's what we continued to call it initially. I mean, you can see that the porch roof is crooked, and, you know, this building was in horrible shape. And it took us 9 months to renovate it to where we could actually open as a business. We got shut down by the county for a couple of months because we didn't have the right permits, and just so much work. We had to build a whole new floor in this building because the original floor had asbestos in it. It was impregnated in the floor. And I remember we had cut away a section of the floor to see what was underneath. And so somebody reported us. People didn't like us initially. They didn't know who we were, what we were about. And we weren't, you know, we hadn't been in Bailey our whole lives, so we were suspect. And so, so I get this call. Well, back up just a second, Steph. So I get this call that I was out doing something. I don't remember where I was, stock show or something. I get this call from a state representative saying he was a environmental safety guy, and he says, you know, I've been looking through your front windows. We were closed that day. I've been looking through your front windows, and looks like you have a probable asbestos spill. He just made me mad. So I said, so what kind of training do you get to look through a window and determine there's been an asbestos spill? So he was a young guy. I feel bad looking back on it, but he didn't like that. And then after they shut us down to do abatement, I put some signs on the windows and I said, "Free asbestos, inquire within." And I had another one saying, "We're doing as best as we can to get back to work." Wasn't a good idea. I know that, but I was mad. So it didn't help my cause, didn't help us to get open, certainly. So we had to build a whole new floor over the old floor. We entombed the original floor and built a whole new floor above it, going stud to stud from side to side of the building. And that's why our ceilings are 8 feet high, not 10 feet high now. But so we finally, took us about 9 months. We finally opened in 2013. And so you can go back. So when we first were about to get open, 2 critical things happened in 2012 during those 9 months that we were working on the building. The first one was I met my first Bigfoot eyewitness. Her name was Kate. She ran a lodge called the Bailey Lodge just at the edge of town. And the landlord of my building at the time, I don't know how she knew I was interested in Bigfoot, but she mentioned to me that this woman had seen a Bigfoot. I had never talked to anybody. I was like, "You are kidding me." And so I said, "I've got to talk to this gal." So I called her up out of the blue, didn't know who I was, asked her if I could take her to coffee, and asked her to tell me her story. And she told me this story, seen her best friend who had been visiting and was going to be leaving to move away permanently. They went on a hike. It was in May. It was dusk, still daylight. They're hiking back behind the lodge. And now that I know Bailey and I know how prominent Sasquatch are around here, they heard a big crack up ahead of them, and they looked up, and this Sasquatch comes running down the hill about 200 feet from them, runs down the hill, doesn't look at him. It's bent over, swinging its arms, butt sticking out, ran down the hill and disappeared in the trees. And I said, "Well, what did you guys do then?" She said, "Well, we both stood there for a minute and neither of us said anything. And then I said, 'Was that a deer?' And she said, 'I knew it wasn't a deer, but what are you going to say?' And so her friend goes, 'No, that wasn't a deer. That was a Sasquatch. I'm sure of it.' And so they both agreed that's what it was. Daylight, double person sighting, very hard to have mistaken identity. And then when they realized before that, as they were walking earlier, these pine cones kept falling around them and they couldn't figure out where these squirrels were or whatever. Now they realized the Sasquatch had been tossing pine cones at him from hiding. And then he came and showed himself to him. And when I went back with her later that day to look at the spot, because it had only been a month before, I think, or so. And I walked to the top of that ridge, and there was a dead tree right at the edge of the descent, and one of the branches had been broken off. So he had stepped on that branch intentionally, broke it, and then ran down the hill. So then Finding Bigfoot came to Bailey to do a Colorado episode. And I found out about this from Kate because she was going to be one of the witnesses. So I went to the filming of the show, and when they did Finding Bigfoot, they always started with a town hall meeting, which you thought when you watched the show, these were kind of, impromptu stuff. Nah, it's TV. So they had all these people pre-assigned who had supposedly had encounters that they wanted to come speak. And, a lot of it was set up, but so the whole cast came. And so when I knew I was going to this meeting, I had already kind of decided. I told my wife, "Look, I'm interested in Bigfoot. I think other people in town are probably interested in Bigfoot." I found out just how many when I went to this meeting. So I had cut out this wooden cutout of Bigfoot holding a sign that said, "I don't believe the evidence supports the existence of humans." And so I loaded that thing in my pickup and I drove over there for this town hall meeting. And I told the producers and said, hey, I got this thing in my truck if you're interested. So he said, yeah, we may use it for some B-roll. So I got it out, and they ended up putting it right by the front door. If you've watched the Colorado episode of Finding Bigfoot, you'll see it as the actors walk in the building. They walk right past it. So they had it in the main part of the video. So I met the whole cast, met Bobo, met Cliff, got to know Bobo pretty well over the years, but and Matt and Renee. And so there was 100, maybe 110 people at this meeting. I never saw any publicity for it. I'm like, where do the people come from? I mean, coming out of the cracks in the woodwork. That's Bigfoot people, man. They find out about something and they're all going to be there. And sure enough, it was full meeting, standing room only. And so I'm listening to 7, maybe 8 people, including Kate, stand up and tell stories about Bigfoot around Bailey. And so we decided we would call the store the Bailey Country Store and Sasquatch Outpost. So that was that slide, where coffee and great conversation are always free. Great conversation is still free. Coffee ain't. Sorry. We sell prepackaged coffee. We don't sell fresh coffee. And I know somebody's going to tell me now, man, you should be selling coffee still. So we did that for a couple of years, and until we realized that if we kept trying to sell groceries, we were going to starve to death. And we had to make a critical decision that was very risky, but we made the decision to can the groceries, sold all of our fridges and freezers and stock, and went 100% with the Sasquatch Outpost. This is us remodeling it to begin with. We had to cover all the walls, redo the walls. This was the very first Bigfoot meeting we ever held in the store before we were even open. This was Mike Johnson of Sasquatch Investigations of the Rockies. And we had a bunch of people at this meeting. There's like 80 people at this meeting. And Mike was the expert. He was talking about how he had seen so many signs of Bigfoot around Bailey. And so that's a very historic meeting now. And let's see, did I have any other? So, shoot, these should have come in one at a time. Dang it. I thought I had that. Nope. So anyway, the top left was the counter. Back then this used to be the post office. Our building used to be the town post office. And those cubby holes to the left were the mailboxes. And so, yeah, Larry, this is my Graceland. That was awesome. And back in what's now the museum, the middle picture, the prominent picture, is what is now the museum. Back then, it was just a room. We put tables, and I had a Colorado map already, and I had some pictures in the back of the first footprints I'd ever found. But yeah, I would say, and this is what you would see as you walked in the front door then, and this is what you see when you walk in the front door now. So everything has changed. So I agree with that statement. Find what your passion is, what your vision is, follow it, and you will have success. And I'm convinced of that. Our biggest problem is not knowing what our passion is and figuring that out. Once you can figure that out, life and the universe will make sure that you're able to pursue your passion. So couldn't have done any of what you see here without having a wife who was not only a Bigfoot believer, she became one. She wasn't one initially. She looked at me as a nutcase, but she became a believer. And Daphne became a believer because after listening to 50, 60, 80, 100 people come in and tell their stories, and she realized these people are not crazy. These are normal, rational people who had an encounter with something they do not understand. And before she ever had her own encounter, which she did later, she became a believer from other people's testimonies. So we've retired the Sasquatch on the right. You can't tell from this picture, but he was getting pretty ratty. And I built the one on the left. I think the one on the left is a wrestler. The guy on the right was a basketball player, but So the one on the right, I'm not gonna give him a fresh coat and figure out what I'm gonna do with him. But the and was that the last photo? I can't remember. Okay, so in brief, and that's already an hour and a half. That's my story. I don't anticipate ever telling this story again. That's how we ended up in Colorado. That's how we ended up doing what we're doing. I will say, I love what I do. I get up every morning excited about meeting people who want to know more about Sasquatch. I get excited about taking people out to look for Sasquatch. And I wish everyone could love what they do as much as I do. Honestly, I mean that with all my heart. And I have the best family and the best staff in the world. Stephanie, Tammy, Leah, Lori, trust them all 100%. Kareen, my oldest daughter, and they love what they do. And I get so many compliments about my staff that I love to pass on back to them and say, you won't believe what somebody said now. They just love you gals. Stephanie had a great one the other day, and this guy said, man, this woman loves people. I said, yes, she does. So I love hearing compliments for the people that work with me and passing them on. So that's all I had. Now, before I close, when I had my 60th birthday year and some ago, Daphne surprised me by doing a huge surprise party. And I don't know how many people were there. 80 people or something. It was unbelievable from every part of my life. So one of the things I've done over the last 9 years, and I don't do so much anymore, I recruited a team of Old West reenactors, and we still do this. We would rob the train in Georgetown Loop Railroad. I still do that. Couldn't give it up. But I had people from my Park County regulators team were there, and staff from the store, and people that, I mean, every aspect of my life, there were people there. I was totally surprised, did not expect it. So my middle daughter, Nicole, who works for DreamWorks in Southern California, created this slideshow to music. I'm not going to show it all, but I'm just going to show you part of it to end this. And so before Steph shows this, just want to say thank you guys for listening. Appreciate your patience. I enjoyed telling you these stories. Like I said, it's probably the only time you're ever going to hear them. So until next week, keep on squatching.
Joseph's face was black as night. The pale yellow moon shone in his eyes. His path was marked by the stars in the southern hemisphere, and he walked his days under Africa's skies. This is the story of how we begin to remember. This is the powerful pulsing of love in the vein. After the dream of falling and calling your name out. These are the roots of rhythm, and the roots of rhythm remain. In early memory, mission music was ringing around my nursery door. I said, take I knew that I wouldn't. I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. So good, so good. I got you. I bet you never heard old Marshall Dillon say, Miss Kitty, have you ever thought of running away? Settling down, would you marry me? If I ask you twice and beg you pretty please, she'd have said yes in a